Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to talk about our webinar, Preventing the Insider Threat, joined by two spectacular guests. First, we have Josh Linder, who has over 20 years of experience as a security consultant and marketing guru. And next, we have Garrett Grajek, CEO and president of YouAttest. I'll be passing this over to Josh shortly. He's going to go over the brief history of the recent developments with the Twitter case. And then we're going to go over who the insider threat exactly is and what can be done. After this point, I'll pass on over to Garrett, who's going to discuss YouAttest, our solution. Finally, I'll be going through a short demo on access review and how YouAttest can be best utilized. Hold on to your questions till the end. We will have an opportunity to go over those in detail. That's how we'll wrap everything up. But right now, Josh, take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Austin. So if you remember one thing today of somebody who has been involved in the space for a pretty long time, insiders are very difficult to detect and nearly impossible to stop. We like to show a visual, which is that once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's impossible to put back in. And this is clearly something that we've seen over the past couple of months, specifically around what we've seen recently with regard to Twitter that we'll discuss in a couple of moments. But once the data is gone or the damage is done, which are two types of downstream effects of the insider use case, it's gone or it's done. So we're going to have a couple statistics from organizations whom we trust and respect today. The first is Optiv. Optiv, for the past couple of years, has been tracking the many areas of concern and worry, so to speak, for chief information security officers. And they actually have a wonderful page available that you can find very easily that goes through basically the periodic chart of the CISO concerns. And one of the areas, or actually two of the areas with regard to this, is around insider. Now, insiders can be both malicious and they can also be accidental. So what we see here, and this data actually is about 2 years old, but still the statistics have held true, that more than 3/4 of organizations have experienced loss or theft of data over the preceding 2 years. And the leading cause was insider negligence. And then 64% of insider threats were related to simple negligence. The remainder was malicious intent. Again, we'll talk about what these mean in a couple of moments. But again, Optiv in partnership or in unison with the Ponemon Institute published this, and it is something just to look at because folks like Verizon, for example, have actually stated that only 1/3 of overall attacks are insider related. So there's really no consistent good use of data, but this is something that is important enough to focus on. So Twitter goofed. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know this. Why is it a big deal? 80% of internet users are spending time on social media, with an emphasis on Twitter and Facebook. This actually comes from Cox Media Group, who's one of the large media concerns throughout the United States. They have radio, television, as well as they have some interest in newspapers, but those have been sold off. What should be also noted here is that organizations of all types and sizes are reimagining, they're rethinking their social media policy in light of many, many, many events that are going on right now. And what I've seen in reviewing some of these policies over the last couple of weeks, in fact, is that social media policy has named by name explicitly a number of websites and other internet properties and services. But the thing that stuck out was a quote or a line that said, "This policy will change." So there is a concern about how, where, and then when, which is now throughout the business day, as people are working from anywhere, social is being used. Well, of course, Twitter had an incident. And what's interesting is that the key takeaway as it relates or it pertains to the insider threat is that a teenager socially engineered Twitter employees. So they weren't necessarily malicious in their intent, or at least we don't believe so. But the fact of the matter is that a malicious team did get access to these Twitter accounts. And what did they do? The initial thing that came out that we all saw was Bitcoin spoofs, where they actually got hundreds of thousands of US dollars in Bitcoin. And obviously that does vary. Much of that came from Asia. We don't fully know yet whether there were additional insiders who were contributing to those Bitcoin deposits, because there were some very large single transactions. So they may have even spoofed the actual deposit. But beyond that, they downloaded data. And just some concerning things that, of course, have hit the press is that they targeted 130 accounts. They tweeted from 45 accounts. 36 were direct message accounts or direct messages that were accessed. And then, of course, there were many DMs within there. And then they downloaded information from 7 accounts. And really the key takeaway is that, yes, this did involve insiders. Now, again, there are different categories of insiders we will get to in a couple of moments. How did it happen? The first is that the notion of privileged account security wasn't fully fleshed out at Twitter. There wasn't adequate and ongoing training. There was lack of institutional oversight, which will probably be terminology that will be reused. Too many people had access. Audits missed multiple gaps in their policies. And also the thing that we added just recently to this story is that it's a reoccurrence of an SMS flaw. And when we look at what happened, this is not the first time that something happened with Twitter. Now, the left too, and even you can argue a little bit of the right of these 3 use cases were outsider related, but there's a comment at the end of the paragraph quoted, which is that it's raised nagging questions about how to detect and halt so-called insider threats. So why are we picking on Twitter? Why do we bring this up? Why is this important? It shows that even one of the largest, most secure, smartest companies who is technically advanced can be impacted by, just to repeat their words, the so-called insider threat. And I don't necessarily believe that it's so-called. I believe that every one of us should be aware of insiders and that they are within the organization. So who are they? Who do we see as insiders? Looking at research organizations like Gartner Research and others, they fall into 4 categories or 4 types: goofs, pawns, collaborators, and lone wolves. So when you look at these and in the series of blogs which we have contributed, we've published 3 of them in the last couple of weeks, and you can find that on YouAttest.com. These different types of insiders really act differently for different purposes. So the goofs are really going to be the accidental people. They might click on something. They might receive, for example, a malicious FedEx bill and accidentally load malware on their computer, which then enables outsiders to take control. That is in many ways the essence of the Twitter hack, and that's a special type of attack they use, which is known as vishing or voice phishing. The second are pawns. Pawns are traditionally going to be the types of individuals who may have outsized rights or control within the organization. They might do it accidentally themselves, which can, if you will, skew them towards the goof. But pawns can potentially also be socially engineered and or threatened. For example, it could be a single parent who is afraid, or it could be one of the newest things that we've seen, at least in mass, has been extortion. It could be the sextortion or otherwise. Those are pawns. It could also be lower level employees who have access and they're befriended by people. So those are going to be the pawns. But as we move to the collaborators and lone wolves, those are going to be really the folks who have the outsized control and have the ability to do damage. What damage can they do? It depends, and we'll talk about that in a couple of moments. But the second piece of this is really around why do insiders steal, or why do they damage? And this was really the topic of our first blog. The reason is that they don't think they're going to get caught. The fact of the matter is that even if you trace this back to children, and if you look at why elementary school children will cheat on tests or homework or things like that, they don't see necessarily the consequences. And insiders in many cases don't believe that they'll get caught. They see that the reward is much higher than the risk. Goals depend. In the last couple of months, with a number of different things that are occurring in the world and specifically in the United States, a lot of the goal is to make a stink or make noise with regard to social justice. And I think that's really a critical driver behind why the social media policy is being re-envisioned, rethought, republished. And how do they profit? Business disruption is a big one. Competitor, meaning that the ability to, in fact, help a competitor through getting a job there, or just in general damage their own company or their own organization by assisting a competitor, or pure financial gain. And the trickiest part about these insiders, the who, is that we don't know who is going to become quote unquote evil. We don't know when the trusted insider becomes evil. And just to also take this to a next step, an insider in today's world doesn't have to be an employee. An insider could be a contractor. An insider could be a partner. An insider could be a board member. So I think a critical thing here is that understanding what flips them is going to be a very instrumental way, or a very instrumental step in preventing the damage which could be caused. Now, there are other ways of preventing the damage that we'll talk about in a couple of moments as well. So what is the motivation? Why do insiders do it? We talked about it briefly. An excellent webinar from March of 2017 was SecureWorks, Chris Ewell. And it really goes through quite in depth the type of not only insider threat, it's not focused on insiders per se, but the motivation, if you will, for people who do malice. And it's titled, "What Makes Me a Victim," or "What Makes a Person a Victim?" And really it goes through international threat actors, as well as a lot of different aspects of the, call it the misuse of credentials. But within this, there are three major categories that you can tease out of this: data theft, disruption, and data manipulation. The data theft pieces break down to three: financial, economic advantage, and political and military. Disruption is two of the three above, and then data manipulation by itself is a standalone category. And this is really, when you tie this back to insiders, this is a critical way and critical reason why they do what they do. But wrapping this up, they're not all criminals. Insiders are a complex set of actors. It's not just one type of people. They have many motivations and can all cause harm in different ways, shapes, forms, even if it's not necessarily a near-term financial issue, as Garrett and Austin and the YouAttest team have found. When we come back to audit and look at the policies and how they're being enforced, audit findings can, in fact, have a material impact on the organizations downstream. But back to Ponemon Institute, nefarious internal actors are more difficult to uncover and contain, leading to an average cost per incident that is more than double that resulting from the simple negligence. So I think that's really something really to keep in mind. This isn't something that you can just ignore and kick the can down the road. It is something that needs to be looked at and focused on. So what can we do and how can we stop it? Ideas to stop threats. I like to go back to the world of physical security. And there are many organizations worldwide, many countries, many states who have done an excellent job. Singapore is one of them. They have done an excellent job in healthcare as well as in security threats. And their way to do this is by finding bad actors, meaning that they uncover the people who could potentially disrupt and do harm. This is similar to Malaysia, who has done an excellent job, as well as a number of the countries in the Middle East. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection does this a little different way. They look at bad things. And why I'm highlighting this is that when we look at the insider threat, it's a blend of the two things, because in reality, it's a longer term type of, if you will, attack. So you have to look at the bad things, meaning what are their techniques, their tools, their procedures, different things like that. So the blend of those two is really important as we translate that to finding insiders in the world of electronic or cybersecurity. But then also the final one, as we now translate this to where this discussion will go in a couple of moments, is that YouAttest looks at this a little bit differently. One of the things that we haven't necessarily seen in the physical world, which is really validating and removing access. So how do you prevent folks from actually even having the access to do harm? So for cybersecurity, what can we do? We can identify why people have access, and we can automate the costly, time-consuming, labor-intensive processes, taking action before it's too late. And one of the things that we did not explain or not present within this today, which we will offer as a follow-up, is that when we look at this through an industry lens, we look in automotive, for example, Tesla, at the same time that they announced their financial earnings, Tesla also noted that they were suing one of their competitors who had hired some of their former employees. We've seen this with Waymo. We've seen this with others. We've seen this in the world of financial services. We've seen it in hospitality and travel, where Starwood planted a seed and somebody took that seed to Hilton and tried to create a new brand, and they were caught. So I think the critical thing is that if people do not have access, then they will not have the ability to, if you will, do that harm, and you can get ahead of the insider threat. So the key piece of advice from myself in this area, in this focal place, is focus on multi-layered security techniques and technology. Create a good security program, a baseline. Utilize your single sign-on, your identity and access management tools that you have in place today. Just about everybody has those. Focused both internally, which is the protection of the corporate or the organizational assets, as well as access to the systems which you deliver services to your customers, and then also the external ones that your customers interface with you today. And then over time, it's really embedding that auditing awareness, really the understanding of where and how people can get access, and removing that in ample time. But prevent accounts from being active is a key thing here. And I think that's really, this brings us back to the webinar I mentioned with SecureWorks, that the vulnerable two-factor is one of the technical things that can be part of an insider action. Make sure that your accounts are deactivated en masse and that people don't have access so long as they don't need it. So wrapping this up, I think really the most critical thing is securing the technical stuff, managing user accounts and privilege levels, auditing things, and also conducting independent third-party reviews. Again, we have published a blog this week about third-party risk management. That is one piece of this, but also making sure that you are up to date with those third-party reviews, the external view of your organization. I appreciate the time, and I will now hand it back to Garrett, and we will come back for questions at the end.
Fantastic, Josh. That's Josh Linder. I'm always amazed every time I hear him speak is the depth of information that Josh has. And I have to say, having part of the organization and the preparation for this, Josh had about 3 times as much information as he showed. So maybe we'll take some of that information and reveal some of the information in QA. And Josh, great ability to organize and communicate. Okay, some key points Josh stated that I'm going to go into in a real tactical, practical product way, right? One of which, 3 points Josh had: identify why the people have access. Okay, guys, that's what the audit's for. And I've done a great job of working with the YouAttest. What I should say, YouAttest done a great job, and I've been able to listen in some amazing conversations in the last 5 months from customers, where they say what their practices are. And customers have good practices, but what the other 2 points is where the practice is failing. They have practices about identifying what people have access, but it's not automated and quantified in a consistent and reliable manner. And the customers know that. You're on this webinar, the customers I talk to know that. That's why they're looking for a product like YouAttest. And they not only want to quantify this, but then they want to take action. Thus, YouAttest. YouAttest exists for this purpose. It exists not to replicate what is done in the enterprises. And you'll see we worked very closely with some amazing partners, primarily Okta in the SSO, IM, and provisioning space. Just an amazing tool, okay? We're not there to replicate. We're there to ensure and work with the CFO compliance group to ensure that what was deployed in the Okta and other implementations is and can be attested to and is secure when it comes to access policies. That's YouAttest. We are going in there and saying who gets what, who gave what, and why. Why was that access granted? And here, and I'll repeat it again, my key word is to quantify this in a consistent manner. What is going on in these enterprises I see is great intentions and ludicrously intelligent people, but there is not a consistent process to quantify these access reviews. And of course, it's not just me saying this, it is NIST has been saying this, and they came out with their Cybersecurity Framework 1.1 and state straight out, and this is what I reference, this is why we exist, and I would say, since Josh lit off with some great numbers, in about our calls, 40% of today's CISOs are looking at me and saying, Garrett, yes, I'm under regulations, I'm under this, I'm under high trust, I'm under HIPAA, I'm under PCI DSS, I'm on SOX, I have to do a SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, but I follow best practices from NIST. And this is what NIST states straight out, PR.AC-4, that you should be reviewing your accesses. And that is a best practices. But like NIST and like many of the guidances that you see on the right side that copy NIST, it's not telling you how to do this. I'm going to go into what people are trying. We're going to go into where YouAttest improves on this. Okay? Just to let you know, who is demanding this product right out is people under SOX 404, and we're getting a much larger exposure internationally now, so JSOX and the other replicas of the SOX. In addition, the enterprises who are under ISO 27001 and 27002 is a big driver for access review. Your options. This is where we shine. Where we shine is enterprises right now, many are still doing spreadsheets and a really painful dialogue between the wonderful external auditor and the internal IT group called the provided by client, the PBC process. The PBC process is broken, my friends. It's broken, it's too time consuming, it's almost intellectually insulting to the people and the level of intelligence on the two sides. That is, the external auditor says, I need this document, I need this access, give me a screenshot here, give me a snippet of the log. Unbelievably and unbelievably not quantified and unbelievably painful and time consuming. Or tools out there that are supposed to be addressing IJ are very expensive. They know they're expensive. I've talked to them and they know they're expensive to deploy. and they're just out of the reach of most of my customers. And I'm not talking just, only small customers can't afford them. Departments do not have access in a manner to control these large tools. That's where we're seeing a lot of traction for YouAttest, where customers and prospects are coming to us, seeing a webinar, seeing the demo, trying this because it installs in 3 minutes, and saying, yeah, I need this, and I need this in my group or my department, and I'm a part of a much larger organization. But as Josh finished off, an audit of access reviews doesn't make any sense if it's simply just a person who is doing the actual administration of the identity. It has to be done by a third party or an outside party from the group. Okay? What we did is we built a cloud-based auditing tool. Cloud-based auditing tool, 100%. The GUI is our strength. You're going to see this and go, wow, that's really simplified the process for an external auditor. Okay? And when I say external auditor, all I mean is it could be inside the company or it could be outside the company, but it's simply not the admin. And we did hooks early on into the amazing and most successful SSO product, Okta, because they have a great system on both directions. The great system hooking into the enterprise directory, your LDAP or your ID, and externally exposing these in a secure and quantified manner through OIDC and SAML for the APIs. And that's what we're going to go into the demo, is where we can come in here and allow someone who's not the admin, not the AD admin, not the Okta admin, to actually look at what accesses are there and why they've been giving, and create notes, create questions, delegate, and run what is most important, reports. Okay? What I also want to let you know, for the concept here of insider threat, something that customers have asked us to do, this is our latest feature, user event-based attestation. Comes straight out of PR.AP03. This is what we're delivering now this month, and is the concept of saying, if a role changes in a group that you designate, let's take that role and let's have someone review it. In this case, what we do is allow you to set triggers of which accounts, which groups, what events, and then take an alert on when that changes. That is each one of these, and Josh has an amazing memory of all the attacks. And then I went with my engineers and we looked at those attacks and then quantified them, how they could be stopped with something like this in place, where when something changes in one of those key groups in the event and in your directory, and we all know, everyone with their certified ethical hacker or your CISSP knows, the main objective of someone coming into your enterprise is lateral motion across the enterprise and then escalation of privileges. This is where we stop them, is where we say, okay, you escalated your privileges, therefore let's send that alert and let's get you quantified, and let's get you that access be allowed or revoked. All right, now's the time. Austin, I'm going to relinquish control and let you run a demo.
Excellent, sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Garrett and Josh. Perfect. So as Garrett and Josh were talking about, it's really key to know who is actually the one that you're giving this access to. And you need someone from a third party or a decent understanding of what does this access actually mean. You don't want to be giving someone too much access or the incorrect access that might conflict. Garrett mentioned that we are 100% powered by Okta. So what we're able to do is we're able to go into your Okta SSO and show you a really good snapshot of who exactly has access to what at what given time, and allow you to go out and further take action. But given that we're connected with Okta, the first step that we have to do is connect to Okta itself. So this is from start to finish what it will look like to run an access review and set up YouAttest as well. First step right here, we're just going to log into YouAttest using our company domain. And then since we already have single sign-on enabled, what we'll do is we'll log into Okta as well. At this time, if you weren't already set up, this is how you would do so. This is from start to finish, all the process needed to deploy YouAttest and get started on access review. All you'll do is go to API integration, click Add API, and over here, enter a friendly name for your API, provide the Okta URL, and enter in the API key. Once that's taken care of, you're 100% deployed and ready to start running your first access review. Which brings us over to these next steps. So once you're set up, you could either check your applications that are within Okta, or you could go through and manage your groups, whether that's Active Directory or Universal Directory within Okta itself. We do handle applications that are outside of Okta. I'll get to those a little bit later, but for right now, let's go over to creating a campaign based off of doing an access review for applications. To do so, right here on your main screen, we'll go over to Auto Campaigns, select Application Audit, and now we're going to go to Create New. We're going to select the option to run an application audit, select the Okta API source. We'll create the campaign by naming it, and then select the due date. Once we've done this, what's showing up on the next screen are all the applications that are in your Okta environment. So if it is there, you will be able to see it here. I'm going to select these 3 applications. You could select as many as you'd like. You could even select a percentage to randomly review the access of these users. So say you have thousands of users, you're able to go through and save some time. I'm going to click Done, and what this is doing right here is it's pulling all the information from these applications, the user, the level, and putting it on a worksheet where then you could have this delegated out to an internal or external auditor or the proper application owners to assign access and review it. Which brings us on to steps 3, 4, and 5. The revoking of access, the delegating out of the review, or certifying the access of each user. So now that we have all these users in one nice place, we go back into this report. I'm going to expand this out so we can see all the users. And you can see here, we have the application name, we have the user name. So long as lifecycle management is enabled, you will be able to see the role, profile, user manager, and the job title. All that information will be populated. So here you get a very clear window into who has access to what and at what level. From this point, you'd either select all and certify, but most likely that won't be the case. You're going to want to go through and make sure that the proper authority is reviewing each one of these application users. To do so, we have a few options. You can either delegate out by entering in the email here, or you could assign to multiple reviewers by entering in their group there. This way, multiple individuals will sign off on one group of users or one user before access is granted. Next, we do have the feature to auto-delegate this out. So say you have thousands of users, multiple different managers, this will automatically capture the user manager and assign it to these users. At this point, the manager will be able to go in and say, should this user have access or should they not? Is there a conflict or is there not? And then finally, that brings us to the revoke feature. To revoke, simply just click on it. And now you can see this user has been revoked. I want to point out, no changes have actually been made to this access yet. When we go back out here, that brings us to the final step of this process, the actual report. Here is where, when we go back into our account, you could scroll down to the campaign that we just worked on. I'm going to click Execute. And now what this is doing is it's compiling the report. It's taking the user that we revoked to making sure that that access has been revoked. And all the users that we certified, it's just creating a report verifying this, saying that these users have been certified at this given time, and this is who took the action. So when we go back down to this, we click into the report, which is found in the upper right. You can see just that. We'll have the user, the application, and then right here you can see certified, you can see revoked. This will show the number of users that reviewed it and if it was 100% attested for. So if you have multiple reviewers, this will be different. And if one user said one thing and there was a conflict, it'll record that in the report as well. Going back out, this brings us on to our next step. So we have applications that might be outside of Okta that need to be managed. When we go over to this, we offer the feature to upload a CISSP. To do so, all you'll do is go over to our CISSP campaign, go to CISSP audits, and you'll go to create a new campaign. Just like before, we'll create a name for this. We'll provide a due date. And the only difference is we're going to select the CSV file right here. So in doing so, you can have any type of headers you would like on your CSV, because on this next step, you're going to map these to our fields on this side. You can have your own custom headers that don't match our descriptions. You'd simply just enter them in here. And finally, if you have multiple roles for application, you're able to select multiple roles just by separating these under the roles column by commas. So now one user can have multiple roles per application. Instead of going through and mapping all this, I'm going to jump over to a completed report. Right here, I'll click into this, and you can see this is an application that is outside of Okta that we have imported. And right here, you can see the details where this user has these types of roles within the Salesforce application, where now a reviewer could come in, certify, revoke the access, or if they need to, delegate this out to the proper authority. Just like before, they could delegate this out to one user by entering email, or a group of users by entering in the Okta group there. Finally, what's a little bit different about this process is we are able to pull managers from Okta. So given this might be a legacy application, it might not be properly mapped, we are able to select users by mapping them with the existing information inside your Okta environment, which is pretty cool because now you're able to have existing information for users that previously wasn't there. And it makes the next step of actually automatically delegating this out to those managers much easier than it would be before, instead of having to manually find them. So now you can ensure that the right people are reviewing the right access account, making sure that you aren't overlooking anything in your next audit. That's all I had for my portion of the demo going on. If you're interested in contacting us, here's our information. Garrett, I'm going to let you say a few final words, as well as you, Josh, and questions.
No, good stuff there, Austin. I hope what the audience saw today was the problem, the statement that Josh made of the insiders, where they're coming from, then a description, what I itemized, and why it's not only something you should be doing, but pretty much have to do with the regulations. And then what Austin did an excellent job is stepping through the actual process that replicates the proper practices and procedures your enterprise should be doing for not only an audit, but audit security, which is attesting to the roles. Leave you with a few points. It's 100% SaaS pricing. You can pay by the monthly. It is unlimited reports, unlimited delegation, paying us. You can even swipe your credit card to get started or wire. And something really important, something really I'm a believer in. This is software. We are taking amazing input from not only our customers, but some really excellent external auditors who are giving us advice. And therefore, all features that we are building, we're rapidly taking in and then releasing some amazing features like the user event attestation we showed. All features are supported in the license in 2020. Anytime you buy anything we release here will be included. So all the best. Austin, we got a few questions.
Absolutely, yes, we do. Let me get to this question first. Josh, I think you might be best in answering this. It looked like we were just having a discussion within our panelist board over here. Let me expand this out and pull it up. So Josh, it looks like someone's concerned and they're asking about a lot of times that this insider threat is more concerned with getting data. Can you expand on if this is the only case, if people are only interested in taking personal information, or if there's anything else that they're going after?
Yeah, so data is not necessarily the only thing. And this is, I believe, as something we've seen in recent times. Financial is what we saw with Twitter in the last couple of, call it weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. What we've seen with other organizations is vandalism and disruption, where there isn't necessarily data, so to speak, but it's more about causing some level of disruption for the organization or besmirching a brand, so to speak. There can also be cases in which people want to make a name for themselves. So those are other use cases. The data example, either if it's a theft or borrowing of information or an accidental review, and in healthcare, is probably many of the folks who are on this this webinar are familiar with HIPAA protecting information from either prying eyes for malicious purposes or accidental purposes is a big piece of it. But the theft of data and using that data potentially by foreign actors who are tied into insiders, which is something we did not talk about, is definitely an important and also concerning threat vector. So data is one piece of it, but I think also data unto itself, there are many other ways of looking at data more than just whether it's being borrowed or reused.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh. Next question we got regarding YouAttest is if an app info is not available in Okta, can you still perform the review? And then how can the reviewer tell whether the user is an active employee? So this may have been asked a little bit earlier before we went into our CSV demo, but the answer is if an application is outside of the Okta, you can still use YouAttest to address these users. You still can perform this audit or access review using the CSV feature. All you have to do is export the data and upload it into YouAttest. The next question about how can a reviewer tell if the user is an active employee or not? This is why we have the feature where you can delegate out to the responsible party. We want the right people reviewing the right information. And so using our delegation feature, you could really have a good understanding that the right person knows who's in their department, knows that there's a duplicate account, can see this, or could notice that this employee is no longer with the company and quickly take an action to revoke this user immediately. Good questions. Scrolling down over here. So we have who will the delegee see once they're assigned to a user? This question, I believe it's around, will they be able to see other campaigns? Will they be able to see other users? So for this answer, it is only who you assign the manager to, whoever you're assigning this individual to, they will only see that information. They're not going to be able to see any other campaigns. They're not going to be able to see any other users. They're only seeing the people that they're responsible for and the ones that you've clicked and assigned them to. So going through their—
And Austin, let's add on, and now with our feature of multiple reviewers, you can select multiple reviewers, right? But I think you answered that perfectly when saying it's a beautiful segregation of duty that only the people you assign, be it singular or plural, right, will be able to review that data. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Good point, Garrett. We do have the multiple reviewers. There's a couple options with this as well, where you can either have everyone must sign off on one user before an action takes place, or just one of the group that you assign is sufficient to take an action. So good point. And those will be the only people that will see what you've assigned them to. Exactly. Let's go into this. So what type of audit trails, system logs does YouAttest have? Good question when we're talking about this. What YouAttest is really going to create is, one, we went over the reporting. You have this snapshot in time. At this given moment, these individuals were reviewed, and these were the people who took that action. So if someone was certified, if someone was revoked action, you could see who took the action of actually performing that. And on top of that, you get a great snapshot of, at this given time, this is what our access control looks like. Finally, we do offer the ability to go into and look at user logs. So within YouAttest, you can see what applications or what changes are being made on a user level. And lastly, I want to point out, Garrett mentioned a great point. That's something that's going to be launched very shortly. we have our event-driven audits. So this is when someone changes a title, when someone moves departments, you'll be able to see not only is their current access good, you'll be alerted to review this. But on top of that, you'll be able to say, should they still continue to have access to these old applications? And is there a conflict there? So it really helps highlight any sort of dangers there. You can automatically be pointed in the right direction.
And Austin, I think with that, let's wrap it up. Thank Josh for his wonderful presentation and encourage our audience to reach out to us. Remember, this is a SaaS application, people. We have to set it up. We can get you testing our application in a matter of minutes, either into your Okta or upload your CSVs and start testing and how to quantify your audit in a more precise, accurate, and secure manner. With that, all the best, and thanks for joining.